Hello, and welcome to Fictional Elections, an alternate history YouTube channel that makes videos on fictional elections that are based on real-life elections in the United States. If you have watched the welcome video, you will know at the end of the video I hinted that I would unveil the very first scenario that I will be doing in future videos. Well, the time has come. The first scenario I'll be covering is, if you haven't looked at the video title, it is, what if the United States had a 7-party system? Yeah, that's right, 7, not 2. Imagine we had that. Why? Well, it's because I fucking hate our 2-party system, with one party being a liberal neoliberalist party and another being a fascist neoliberalist party. End of story. I'm joking, but that's a factor why I'm doing this scenario. So a more appropriate explanation to why I'm doing this scenario is because I want to imagine a world where the United States had a 7-party system and how that would affect the United States. And actually, I started this whole scenario back in early 2021 of doing a fictional election on the 2020 election out of curiosity, but without posting it publicly. And since it was a lot of fun and really interesting to do, I decided to do fictional elections on U.S.'s 1932 to 2020 elections due to the party switch and when it happened presidentially in 1928. And I began posting those results of those elections on a private Facebook group. And then once I got into doing the fictional election on the 1944 election, I decided to go back and start doing a fictional election on the election of 1788 to 1789 and doing the ones I had previously missed. And I should have started doing that in the first place. And so I did that, and I got out to working on the fictional election of the election of 1924. Then I decided I should do all of these in video format on YouTube instead of the form of posts in a private Facebook group. And also I should do that, and also do fictional elections on Congress, state legislators until a sentencing amendment is passed, and the presidential nominations and Senate approvals of Supreme Court justices, which I plan on doing after I did a fictional election on every single U.S. election that just covered the presidential elections. And I should have done all that shit in the first place.
You stupid.
No, not.
What's 9 plus 10?
21.
You stupid.
Anyways, so I'm finally going to do everything I still have to do in this scenario and finally do it this time for the beginning. So hopefully I don't screw up again. Anyways, tangent over, back to why 7 parties. Another reason why I'm doing a 7-party system is because having 7 parties generally fills every major political ideology. So what are the 7 ideologies that will make up the 7 parties in the scenario? But before I delve into all these 7 ideologies, I have to explain the major economic systems. So what are the major economic systems? Well, they are capitalism, neoliberalism, liberalism, socialism, and communism. First, capitalism, and what is it? Well, capitalism is a free market economy that is completely free of regulation and government involvement. Basically, capitalism is the freest free market economy out there. And it's also the most dangerous free market economy due to there being no regulations. The many panics in between 1776 and 1901. And it was the economic system that the United States had from 1776 to 1901 due to there being no regulations of the free market, and a lack of enforcement when regulations like the Anti-Sherman Trust Act would suddenly be passed in the late 1800s. Second, neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is a free market economy that has some regulations and some government involvement. Basically, neoliberalism is a mostly free market, but with some restrictions and government involvement. Safer than capitalism, but still mostly dangerous. The Great Depression. The Great Recession. And it's the current economic system the United States has due to deregulation started under Jimmy Carter. Damn it, Jimmy Carter. And it was accelerated under Ronald Reagan.
Everybody repeat after me. Fuck Ronald Reagan. I'm serious. Fuck Ronald Reagan.
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 And every president after Reagan, even Biden. Fuck Biden. Anyways, neoliberalism was the economic system the United States had from 1901 to 1933, due to the progressive era coming into full swing, starting with Teddy Roosevelt, and ending with Woodrow Wilson.
There is a new party which it is difficult to characterize.
Wilson!
And And to understand why Woodrow sucks, check out Cynical Historian series on the turd. Link in the description. Anyway, the rest of our started to enforce regulations that were put in place in the late 1800s and started to put in place new regulations, thus causing the United States to transition from a capitalist economy to a neoliberalist economy in 1901. Third, liberalism. Liberalism is a free market economy that has heavy regulations and a lot of government involvement. Basically, liberalism is a free market economy that has many restrictions and a lot of government involvement. And the United States had a liberalist economy from 1933 to 1977 due to FDR's two New Deals, Truman's Fair Deal, JFK's New Frontier, and LBJ's Great Society. And it's the economic system I support and want to bring back to the United States because of the lack of major recessions, depressions that happened under it, and the prosperity it brought, but unfortunately to only mostly white humans like me. And I want to bring back liberalism just without the racist policies that were around when the United States had it, and before it had it, that hold humans of color back. Like GI Bill being held back from blackmail of World War II veterans back in the past, and policies that are still in effect that keep most humans of color still poor to this day. If you want more information about these free market economies, check out Knowing Better's Libertarianism video, link in the description. Anyways, fourth, socialism. And what is it? Socialism is an economic system where all the means of production are seized and controlled by the government. Basically, socialism is where there's no free market and the government has a monopoly on all industries and makes everything from food to cars. And finally, communism. Communism is a government and economic system where there is no state, no money, no classes, no private property, and all the means of production and consumption are seized and distributed on the basis of need. Basically, communism is anarchy, but all your needs are met, and there's no want. Yes, I'm covering economic systems, but the thing is that communism is both a governmental system and economic system. The two are inseparable in communism, unlike all the economic systems I've talked about. Also, here's a common fact that needs to be busted, and that is the Soviet Union and China are communist, but in nationality, they're not. How? Well, remember what communism is. Communism is a government and economic system where there is no state, no money, no classes, no private property, and all the means of production and consumption are seized and distributed on the basis of need. Let's go over each point. First, no state. Well, the Soviet Union, China from 1949 to 1976, I'll explain later why China is separated, and China today have a government which is the state. So immediately, the Soviet Union, China from 1949 to 1976, and China today aren't communists because if a country doesn't meet all of these qualifications, they're not communist. But we'll continue on. Second, no money. And of course, the Soviet Union, China from 1949 to 1976, and China today have money, so we can cross that out. Third, no classes. The Soviet Union and China from 1949 to 1976 didn't have the class system we have, i.e. poor, middle class, and rich. It was basically just the people in the Communist Party and everyone else. But that's just still classes, so we can cross that out. And of course, China today has the class system we have due to it not having a socialist economy anymore, which I'll explain later when we get into seizing all the means of production. Fourth, no property. The Soviet Union and China from 1949 to 1976 had no private property, so we can check that. And for today, in 2004, China amended its constitution to give citizens the right to private property and protections for it. So since 2004, China has private property, so we can cross that out. Fifth, seizing all the means of production. The Soviet Union and China from 1945 to 1976 had a socialist economy due to all industries being nationalized, so we can check that. For China today, China since 1976, after the death of Mao Zedong, has been privatizing its economy with a mix of nationalized industries and privatized industries. So clearly, de-seizing the means of production, so we can cross that out. Sixth, and finally, seizing all the means of consumption. The Soviet Union, China from 1949 to 1976, and China today clearly didn't seize all the means of consumption due to having money, putting the means of consumption in the people and not the government. So we can clearly cross that out. And because of all these factors, the Soviet Union, China from 1949 to 1976, and China today aren't communist. So if all three aren't communist, then what are they? Well, from looking at the chart, both the Soviet Union and China from 1949 to 1976 had no private property, and they seized all the means of production. Having no private property doesn't really help in trying to figure out what the Soviet Union and China from 1949 to 1976 were. So all we're left is seizing all the means of production, and we already know what economic system involves seizing all the means of production. And that is socialism. And we also know that the Soviet Union and China from 1949 to 1976 were authoritarian, and also China today is still authoritarian. So what can we call the Soviet Union and China from 1949 to 1996? Socialist Authoritarians. It's perfect. It describes what both countries are. Countries that have a socialist economy and an authoritarian government. And basically, the communist parties of both the Soviet Union and China from 1949 to 1976 were communist in name only, when in actuality, they espoused socialist authoritarianism and not communism. And you can apply this to all communist countries of the past, like countries in the Warsaw Pact, including my homeland of Romania, when it was a socialist authoritarian country from 1947 to 1989. And the communist countries of today, like Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, and Laos, they're all socialist authoritarian countries, not communist countries. Now, what about China today? The reason I separate China into China from 1949 to 1976 and China today is because China from 1949 to 1976 was a socialist authoritarian country, while China today is different. So what is China today? Well, remember what I said about China today in seizing all the means of production section? For China today, China since 1976, after the death of Mao Zedong, has been privatizing its economy with a mix of nationalized industries and privatized industries. So clearly, de-seizing the means of production. So yeah, China since 1976 has been privatizing, causing China to no longer have a socialist economy, resulting in an economy with both a private industry and nationalized industry it has today. So what economic system does China of today have? Well, looking at the 5 major economic systems I've mentioned, it feels like China today is either a neoliberalist or a liberalist economy. With China today having a large amount of nationalized industries, allowing a free market, and China finally banning its 996 work culture, making it lean towards liberalism. But me not knowing the amount of regulations that China has on its free market makes it lean towards neoliberalism. So, which one? I honestly don't know. But I'll just go with liberalism due to China of today having a large amount of nationalist industries. If I'm wrong, call me out, please. Anyways, of course, we all know China today is still authoritarian. So what can we call China of today? A liberalist authoritarian country, and not a communist country. Again, the Communist Party of China is communist in name only. Alright, this massive tangent is over. I wanted on it because I always wanted to dispel this common understanding that the Soviet Union and China are communist because, from the evidence I've shown, it's false. The Soviet Union and China from 1949 to 1976 were socialist authoritarian countries, with China today being a liberalist authoritarian country. And all three aren't communist, period. Alright, back to finishing talking about the 5 major economic systems. So yeah, the 5 major economic systems are capitalism, neoliberalism, liberalism, socialism, and communism. And the reason I went over these economic systems first, before talking about the 7 ideologies of the 7 parties of the scenario, is because I don't want to have to explain each of these once I've dived into talking about each of the 7 ideologies. Basically, I sidetracked before I could have sidetracked. Anyways, so what are the 7 ideologies that make up the 7 parties in the scenario? They are...
Stop fucking.
Okay, I'm fine with you all. Alright, the 7 ideologies that make up the 7 parties in the scenario are socialism, progressivism, liberalism, centrism, libertarianism, conservatism, and fascism. First, we'll start with fascism. So, fascism. What is it? Well, fascism is a far-right ideology that believes the group is more important than the individual. Basically, fascism emphasizes the complete regression of social progress to uphold one group of humans over all other groups of humans. If you want more information about fascism, check out Mr. Beat's video on fascism. Link in the description. And of course, the prime example of a fascist party in the United States is the current Republican Party. And of course, some examples of U.S. fascist politicians are Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and her fascist sister, Lo Boebert. So what economic system will the fascist party subscribe to in this scenario? Well, fascism doesn't really subscribe to an economic system. And no, it's not socialism. Nazi Germany was a socialist. Stop typing! Do you want another tangent? Anyways, fascism doesn't really subscribe to an economic system. So we're just going to go with the current Republican Party's economic system, and that's neoliberalism. So, we won't subscribe to this economic system until the 1900s. I'll explain later. So how will this fascist party start off in this scenario? Well, it will start off as the Southern Party because the closest thing to fascist in 1788 in the United States is the South. And because there's no real-life equivalent, we'll just start off with this fictional party. And this party will change over time, but to avoid spoilers, I won't discuss them here. And I'll talk about over the course of the scenario, and also for the other 6 parties. Anyways, what will be the fascist party's party color? Well, it will be orange because of a certain someone, and also it was the color of the Dixiecrats. So I'll go with it, since the South dominates this party. Anyways, lastly, if you want to know the policies of the fascist party, well, it's pretty obvious from all I said, but to keep this video from being longer and to avoid spoilers, I'll go into detail on the policies and platforms of each party as the scenario goes on in each fictional lecture video, so stay tuned. Alright, moving on to conservatism. What is it? Well, conservatism is a right ideology that believes in preventing social progress to uphold traditional values. Basically, conservatism emphasizes the regression of social progress, just like fascism, but to a lesser extent to uphold traditional values. And also, it still oppresses humans of color, but to a lesser extent than fascism. And of course, the prime example of a conservative party in the United States is the Republican Party from 1981 to 2016. And some examples of U.S. conservative politicians are Ronald Reagan,
Fuck Ronald Reagan.
George W. Bush,
George W. Bush, America's most beloved fuck-up.
and Liz Cheney. So what economic system will this conservative party subscribe to in this scenario? Well, just like the Republican Party from 1981 to 2016, they support neoliberalism, so we're going to go with that. So how will this conservative party work in this scenario? Well, it will start off as the Anti-Federalist Party because the Anti-Federalists were the closest thing to conservatives in 1788 in the United States, so we'll start off with a fictional party that's based on the Anti-Federalist faction in real life. And finally, what will be the Conservative Party's color? Well, it will be red because the Republican Party from 1981 to 2016 has color red, so we'll go with that. Alright, moving on to Libertarianism. What is it? Well, Libertarianism is a right ideology that believes in seeking the maximum amount of freedom in everything, and minimizing the state to its major institutions like the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, the police, and the military. Basically, libertarianism emphasizes that the government has no influence on anything from social issues to the economy, and the government can only control its major institutions like the executive, legislative, judicial, police, and the military. Libertarianism is basically the closest thing you can get to anarchy while still having a state. Another thing I want to point out is that libertarianism supports the legalization of drugs, which is good, but it also supports you being able to deny service to anyone for any reason, which is bad. If you want to learn more information about libertarianism, again, check out Knowing Better's video on libertarianism. Link in the description. Anyways, of course, the prime example of a libertarian party in the United States is the Libertarian Party. And some examples of libertarian politicians in the United States are Ron Paul, Gary Johnson, and Joe Jurgensen. So what economic system will this Libertarian Party subscribe to in this scenario? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's
Capitalism or whatever. I swear to God, guys, you can't keep doing that every time I say the word capitalism. Hey, knock it off, turn it off right now, come here, give me that damn wheel, you little piece of shit.
So how will this Libertarian Party work in this scenario? Well, it will start off as the Liberty Party in 1788 because there's no real-life equivalent, so we'll start out with this fictional party. Finally, what will be the Libertarian Party's color? Well, it will be yellow because the Libertarian Party's color is yellow, so we'll go with that. Now, Centrism. What is it? Well, Centrism is a moving ideology and currently a right ideology that believes in preserving the status quo and seeking all compromise on all issues. I'll explain why Centrism is a moving and right ideology later. Basically, Centrism emphasizes that we shouldn't progress nor regress, and that we should preserve where we currently are right now, essentially preserving the status quo. Also, Centrism emphasizes compromise and trying to please all sides. Anyways, two examples of centrist parties in the United States are the Constitutional Union Party and the Alliance Party. which I'll bring up later. And some examples of centrist politicians in the United States are Joe Lieberman, Michael Bloomberg, and Joe Manchin. Fuck him. So what is the economic system that the Centrist Party will subscribe to in this scenario? Well, since centrism upholds the status quo and the current economic system in the United States is neoliberalism, centrism will subscribe to neoliberalism. So how will the Centrist Party work in this scenario? Well, it will start off as a fictional party called the Independent Party in 1788 because George Washington ran as independent in our timeline and he was a centrist at his time. So it makes sense for this first centrist party to be called the Independent Party. And also because there's no real life equivalent, so we'll start off with this fictional party. Anyways, finally, what will be the centrist party's color? Well, it'll be purple because red and blue makes purple. Get it? Next, liberalism. What is it? Well, liberalism is a central ideology that believes in incrementally progressing social issues. And again, I'll explain why liberalism is a central ideology later. Basically, liberalism emphasizes change in social issues, but achieving social progress slowly in baby steps. And I know what you guys are asking about liberalism. Yes, there's two liberalisms. With liberalism with a capital L being a free market economy that has heavy regulation and a lot of government involvement, and liberalism with a lowercase l being a central ideology that believes in incrementally progressing social issues. Anyways, of course, the prime example of a liberal party in the United States is the Democratic Party of today. And some examples of liberal politicians in the United States are Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden. So what economic system will this Liberal Party subscribe to in this scenario? Well, the Democratic Party of today subscribes to neoliberalism, so this Liberal Party will subscribe to neoliberalism. Now, how will this Liberal Party work in this scenario? Well, it will start off as the real-life Federalist Party, because the Federalists were the liberals if they're gay. And finally, what will the Liberal Party color be? Well, it'll be blue because the Democratic Party of today has its color as blue, so we'll go with that. Next, progressivism. And what is it? Well, progressivism is a left ideology that believes in progressing social issues. Basically, progressivism emphasizes change in social issues, but faster than liberalism. And from watching the Welcome video, you know this is the ideology I subscribe to. Anyways, of course, some examples of progressive parties in the United States are the two real-life progressive parties in the past, sort of the Green Party, and the current progressive wing of the Democrat Party. And some examples of progressive politicians in the United States are Jesse Jackson, Ralph Nader, and Bernie Sanders. And yes, Bernie is a progressive and not a socialist. Why? Because you can't be a socialist unless you want to seize all the means of production. And Bernie wanting to nationalize only one industry, i.e. healthcare, doesn't make him a socialist because, again, you cannot be a socialist unless you want to seize all the means of production. And also progressives like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Jamal Bowman, Cory Bush, etc. are calling themselves Democratic Socialists and are, or in part, are completely endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America. Don't get me wrong, I love all these people, and I support them. I have a massive problem with all of them calling themselves Democratic Socialists and being endorsed or partly endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America. And the reason I have a massive problem with this is because all of them are clearly not socialists. All of them only support nationalizing only one industry, again, healthcare. But again, for the billionth time, you cannot be a socialist unless you want to seize all the means of production. So stop calling yourself Democratic Socialist. It's good you support democracy, even though I wish you would explicitly say secular democracy, but that's pretty much what you guys support without saying it. But you clearly guys aren't socialists. You guys are progressives like me. So stop calling yourself Democratic Socialists and call yourselves progressives.
Stop it. Get some help.
Okay, tangent out. So what economic system will the Progressive Party subscribe to in this scenario? Well, it's pretty obvious, and that's liberalism, because progressives want heavy regulation on the free market and have a lot of government involvement, like social programs, like for example food stamps, maybe nationalizing some industries like healthcare, which you can see under progressive presidents like FDR, JFK, LBJ, etc. Anyways, how will this Progressive Party start in this scenario? Well, it will start off as a liberal party. Yeah, that's a pretty contradictory name. I couldn't really come up with a good name. So if you have anything better, please comment it below. Anyways, the Liberal Party will start off in 1788 because there's no real life equivalent, so we'll start off with this fictional party. Finally, what will be the Progressive Party's color? Well, it will be green because of the Green Party, so we'll go with that. Lastly, socialism. What is it? Well, as I stated before, socialism is an economic system where all the means of production are seized and controlled by the government. Basically, again, as I said before, Socialism emphasizes the end of the free market, and for the government to seize and run all industries from food to cars. But in addition to that, socialists have the same social beliefs as progressives like me. Basically, the only difference between progressives and socialists is what economic system they believe in. Anyways, of course, a prime example of the Socialist Party in the United States is the Socialist Party and the Socialist Party USA. And some examples of U.S. socialist politicians are Eugene Debs, Norman Thomas, and Howie Hawkins. So what economic system will the Socialist Party subscribe to in this scenario? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's socialism. So how will the Socialist Party work in this scenario? Well, it was started in 1788 as the Abolitionist Party because socialism didn't come into relevance until the late 1800s. So the closest thing that this party will focus on until socialism comes into relevance is the issue of slavery, and they'll focus on the abolition of slavery, hence the Abolitionist Party. And also because there is no real-life equivalent, so we'll start off with this fictional party. And finally, what will be the Socialist Party's color? Well, usually the official color of a Socialist Party is red, but we can't do red because the Conservative Party has already taken red, so we'll go with a dark red, and I'll be going with a red berry. Whew. That's all the 7 ideologies that make up the 7 parties of the scenario. And yet, there's no Communist Party in the scenario. I just mentioned communism so I go on that tangent. Just kidding. I mentioned communism because it was one of the 5 major economic systems. And also because I wanted to go on that tangent. Anyways, why is there no Communist Party in the scenario? Well, it's because communism wasn't really much of a big movement in the United States compared to socialism. So I decided to cut a Communist Party from the scenario and just have socialism be the farthest left party in the scenario. And speaking of left and right, I need to answer the stuff I said I'll explain later. Alright, here we go! First, fascism not subscribing to neoliberalism for the 1900s. The reason why I said this is because in the United States, it wasn't really until the early 1890s when political parties finally started believing and wanting to regulate the free market. Starting when Benjamin Harrison was president in our timeline. Also, fuck Benjamin Harrison. Anyways, so basically from 1788 to the mid-1870s, all parties will subscribe to capitalism. Then in the mid-1870s, the Socialist Party will subscribe to socialism. When it came into relevance in the United States, and while that happens, the other 6 parties will continue subscribing to capitalism until the early 1890s, when they'll subscribe to the preferred economic system that I mentioned earlier. Second and last, centrism being a moving and right now a right ideology, and liberalism being a central ideology. The reason I'm saying this is because I'm looking at these ideologies from the international political spectrum, and not from the United States political spectrum. Yet the United States has its own political spectrum. It's stupid and weird, but anyways, what's the difference? Well, the United States political spectrum is basically one simple axis going from left to right, with communism, socialism, progressivism, and liberalism on the right, centrism in the center, and with libertarianism, conservatism, and fascism on the right. While with the international political spectrum, it has 2 axes with a left and right axis, with the left being an economic left, and the right being an economic right, and then a top-down axis, with the top axis being authoritarian, and a down axis being libertarian. Basically, the political compass. Now apply all 7 ideologies to the compass, and fascism is here, conservatism is here, libertarianism is here. And yeah, I know it's weird for it to be here when all the way down on the top-down axis is libertarianism, but that's how the spectrum works, so... Anyways, centrism is here, liberalism is here, progressivism is here, socialism is here, and communism is here. And as you can see, liberalism is in the center of the international political spectrum, thus why liberalism is a center ideology. If you want to learn more information on why that's the case, check out Renegade Cut's video on the West Wing, where he talks about it. Link in the description. Now, centrism being a moving and right ideology. To understand why centrism is a moving and right ideology, I have to explain the Overton window. Basically, the Overton window is a range of ideologies that are acceptable to the mainstream population, and centrism lies in the middle of the Overton window. So, what is the current Overton window? While using the United States political spectrum, the Overton window is currently here from progressivism to fascism, because the Republican Party became fascist in 2016, and the most left politicians in the United States who are currently in office are progressives in the Democratic Party, and here's how it looks on the international spectrum for the U.S. So the middle of the Overton window in the international political spectrum is here, thus making centrism right now a right ideology. And since the United States political spectrum is kind of a sham spectrum, we can ignore its middle, which lies in between centrism and libertarianism, which makes no sense. Anyways, Finally, the reason I also call centrism a moving ideology is because the Overton window can change and move over time to what's going on at the time. For example, from 1977 to 2016, the Overton window was from liberalism to conservatism due to the rise of Ronald Reagan.
Fuck Ronald Reagan.
And because of that, the Democrat Party shifted right to stay competitive. And since centrism is in the middle of the Overton window, where centrism goes is dependent on where the Overton window changes and moves. And that's why I've been saying centrism is currently a right ideology and a moving ideology. If you want more information on centrism and the Overton window, check out Jose's video on centrism. Link in the description. Okay, I think that's all the things I have to explain later. Thank you for watching, and until next time of all the things I'll explain later. Okay, now we get into the final part of the setup video, and that's how I'll be figuring out who will win in these elections, and also what are the rules for the scenario. First, how I'll be figuring out who will win these elections. Well, I'll be doing this by taking real-life election results and distributing the votes from the 2 parties to the 7 parties via a distribution chart. So how does this distribution chart look like? Well, basically the chart separates the votes of the US Left Party and the US Right Party into 4. Let's look at each. So if the US Left Party wins, they count it by a margin of 100 or 75%, its votes go to the Socialist Party, and the US Right Party votes go to the Centrist Party. If the US Left Party wins, they count it by a margin in between 74 to 50%, its votes go to the Progressive Party, and the US Right Party's votes go to the Conservative Party. If the US Party wins the county by a margin of 49 to 25%, its votes go to the Liberal Party, and the US Right Party's votes go to the Libertarian Party. If the US Left Party wins a county by a margin in between 24 to 0%, its votes go to the Centrist Party, and the US Right Party's votes go to the Fascist Party. If the US Right Party wins a county by a margin in between 0 to 24%, its votes go to the Centrist Party, and the US Left Party's votes go to the Socialist Party. If the US Right Party wins a county by a margin of in between 24 to 49%, its votes go to the Libertarian Party, and the US Left Party's votes go to the Liberal Party. If the US Right Party wins a county by a margin in between 50 to 74%, its votes go to the Conservative Party, and the US Left Party's votes go to the Progressive Party. If the US Right Party wins a county by a margin in between 75 to 100%, its votes go to the Fascist Party, and the US Left Party's votes go to the Centrist Party. And whatever party gets the most votes wins, and if it's a presidential election, the winning party gets its state electoral votes. And the reason I chose the margins that I've chosen is because it makes sense for the Socialist Party to get the 100% to 75% margin of the US Left Party's votes, and for the US Right Party's votes to go to the Centrist Party because it's the opposition party that has the best chance against the Socialist Party that is the complete ideological opposite, and so on and so on. And yes, it doesn't make any sense to distribute votes of each county to only 2 parties when a county will have votes for all 7 parties. But we live in 2022, so we can't know how each individual person would vote if the US had a 7-party system. So I gotta use real-life margins and a distribution chart to figure out who may have win in a 7-party system. So yeah, it's not perfect, but it's the best I can do. Anyways, lastly, what are the rules for the scenario? Rule number 1. The Electoral College cannot be abolished. Unfortunately, in this scenario, the Electoral College cannot be abolished. And I fucking hate the Electoral College with passion. And if you want more information on why the Electoral College sucks, check out Mr. B's video on why the Electoral College is terrible. Link in the description. Anyways, why am I keeping the Electoral College in this scenario? Well, it's because, unfortunately, we still have Electoral College this day, so kind of makes sense to keep it in, unfortunately. But, no well. Rule number 2. The 7-party system cannot be abolished. Basically, the 7-party system cannot shrink nor expand, and it must stay as a 7-party system forever because that's the scenario. But it doesn't mean an 8th party can pop up from time to time. It's just that it can't join the 7-party system. Rule number 3. Each of the 7 parties cannot fade away. Basically, neither of the 7 parties can end like the Federalist Party, the Democrat Republican Party, the Whig Party, etc. And they all have to exist forever. Rule number 4. Each of the 7 parties can transform. Basically, each of the 7 parties can turn into new parties over time, but they must keep their same ideology. And as I said earlier in the video, I'm not going to talk about the transformations of each party because spoilers. And lastly, Rule 5. The 7 parties can coalition with each other. And it's not like a coalition in countries with parliamentary democracies like Britain or Canada. Basically, coalitioning in this scenario only involves parties endorsing another party's candidate, not running their own candidate in a certain race, and or members of a different party voting on the same legislation. Basically, it's the coalitioning that happens and has happened in the U.S. in our timeline. And I think that's everything I need to explain for this video, hopefully. Stay tuned for 2 announcements. And the first fictional election, the fictional election of 1788 to 1789. And you know the YouTube drill. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to, and thanks for watching.